So I didn't know you know Mike Strouber. Big Mike. Big, yeah, I didn't know that. I love him. He was telling me the other day.
What do you want?
You remember my friend Vicky? They're best friends, him and Vicky. Yeah, Vicky. I already got some. Glasses.
I think so, yeah.
You do. You're just okay. He told me.
There's a lot of things.
You're not going to share for the issue. What is what? Is it the same for police?
No. Be a little bit.
Internally, right?
Some seats in the box seats up in the front. I mean, I'm pissed off because I should honestly just walk off the town and show up and
Well, you guys saw it.
This council meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Law. This meeting of November 15, 2021 was included in the list of meetings published in the Courier News and Star Ledger. Notice of this meeting was also placed on the bulletin board at Borough Hall. In addition, a copy of this notice is available to the public. A copy of the statement shall be included in the minutes of this meeting. Mayor Dennis Sullivan. Here. Council members. Randall Brady. Here. Jane Kavuta.
Here.
Tom Mitchell. Here. Randy Pitts.
Here.
Roger Broom.
Here.
Fred Weed.
Here. Please stand for the flag salute and remain standing. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Once again, we have several moments of silence for tributes to our community. Much too frequent, but they deserve recognition. First, Bonnie Allen, former owner of Somerville Antiques. Back in the 80s when Bridgewater Mall opened and Main Street was going through some challenges, Bonnie Allen was a staunch believer in Somerville. She held the fort until things changed in the economy and in lifestyles. They drive by the pub now and not remember the antique shop that was there. Moment of silence for Bonnie Allen, please. Second person I'd like to recognize is Susan Wright Diltz. She's the wife of former Superior Court Judge Tom Diltz, resident of Somerville. Our kids went to school together. She was truly a Renaissance woman. She was active in her church. She also ran in 13 half marathons and donated all of the money she raised to charity. And she also worked at the National Archives where she edited public papers for various presidents. Again, we all contributed in our own special way. These two women certainly did their part. One of the sounds for Susan Diltz, please. Thank you. The department reports as listed. Kevin, do we have the final results of the election? All of the various forms of votes
I have not received all the write-ins yet from the county, but as far as certification for all.
I believe the 20 is once you get that, if you would, as you have it in the past, stick it on the bulletin board outside of Borough Hall.
Sure.
Good. Thank you. All right, committee reports. I'll start with Mr. Pitts from the floor left.
Thank you, Your Honor. A couple of quick ones. This coming Thanksgiving, Somerville 5K turkey trot starts at 9 a.m. Registration is still going on. You can register at somervilleturkeytrot.com. And then a DSA announcement, free parking in our lots starting from Black Friday up until January 3rd. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Trump.
I have nothing to say.
Councilman Mitchell.
Oh, yes. The Heritage Trail Association book, The Continental Army Comes into Its Own, was an amendment of 1778 to 1779, which is edited by Linda Barrett, Sean Glynn, and Mark Sullivan. It's now available on Amazon. There will be a tree planting this coming Saturday at 10 a.m. at Fireman's Field behind Engine Company. And public service is, and Jaflo Incorporated will be clearing vegetation under the high tension line at the south end of town. That's the high voltage, big high power. They will be clearing the vegetation under those throughout next year. That's all I have.
Mrs. Kabuta.
No report this evening.
Dr. Brady.
Yes, Your Honor. We are going to have a budget next year, and in order to have a budget next year, we have to have a budget meeting. So we're going to have a budget meeting, which is the Budget Finance Committee on Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And don't ask me why that's happening, but it'll be Friday at 4 o'clock. And Councilman Dean will be joining us to discuss where we're going. Remind everyone that there is a 2% cap imposed by the state of New Jersey, and we're going to obviously do whatever it takes to stay within that cap. However, the hurricane, the flood, all the other things that have happened to us in the recent past has to be taken into consideration, especially in regard to capital budget and just how we're going to go ahead. I know that Kevin Sluka has been meeting with FEMA and trying to work some things out with the insurance companies. These things take time. You know, an emergency happens immediately with maybe an hour or two of notice. The result of it takes months to clean up. So we're still in that process, and that we have to monitor that carefully. So that's essentially what we're going to do on Friday, start that process like we always do. And we'll have more reports of our progress as we move along. And that's all I have, Your
Thank
Honor.
you. Mr. President.
Yeah, two quick notes you'll see later on in the meeting. The dirty four-letter word is, we gotta start planning snow. The snow bid removal is on the agenda, so, how are we going? The snow will be here sooner than you think. And finally, if anyone is interested in a board or committee in town, we need a lot of volunteers. We have several boards and committees in town. We need good ideas. So if you're interested, or you know someone that's interested, let us know, and give us an email with a resume and what you're interested in, and we can talk, and hopefully by the January 1st meeting, we'll have a lot of volunteers.
Who should be directed first?
Oh, yeah. That's all right.
Okay. A couple of quick items from myself. With the leaving of Steve Wyman, we have an opening in the OEM coordinator's position. We interviewed several qualified individuals last week. It's a mayoral appointment, and I will have an announcement on that appointment sometime before the first of the year, deliberating on the people that we interviewed, and I'll have that decision so that that person can start to meet with staff. There's some background checks that have to be done as well. So there's a process. As soon as I have an announcement on that, and I will let the public know. I got a call and an email from Public Service Electric and Gas on Friday. Evidently, there's some phone scams going on. Not just Public Service, but evidently Public Service has been, their number shows up on the scam call. If you're uncomfortable in any way, your number customer service is right on your bill. If you're not comfortable, which you shouldn't be, because no utility companies, no banks, no credit card companies are supposed to solicit that kind of information, over the phone. please, if you do get a call like that, you know, exercise good judgment, call public service right away. I had the pleasure to dust off my my eroding teaching skills. I got to visit Vanderveer School 2 weeks ago and teach the second graders all about what a mayor does in 12 minutes. So that was their attention span, and I was able to get 6 lessons done in 75 minutes. And they're very perceptive young kids. Our town's in good hands with our second graders. State of New Jersey, as part of their civics curriculum, has accelerated learning about local government. They're starting out actually in kindergarten. I was not quite ready to tackle that, but I thought I could comfortably go into the second grade. So that was fun, and I hope to do more of that as the state expands its civics program. I remember civics in school, and it's gone by the wayside. The state's bringing it back. Veterans Day. We had a very nice ceremony on Thursday at the plaza. Some of us visited afterwards at the Culver Street Monument, and I want to again thank Alex Cleveland for all of his work. I see his dad Larry's in the audience here, and I thank you. I know he will pass his scouting requirements with flying colors. Not only is it bright and shiny, but it's illuminated at night, which is a nice touch. And I hope to see that same treatment, you know, in some of the other monuments in town. So thank you, Mr. Cleveland, for sharing your son's talent with us. Kevin, if you would draft a letter to Alex, you know, on my signature, thanking him. It did add a lot to the Veterans Day. I hope to incorporate that, you know, next year as well. And my last mention of Veterans Day, I have a show and tell. As part of Veterans Day, I visited my dad. He's buried at St. Bernard's Cemetery. It's 8 years ago. And I noticed that the placard that holds the flag, even though it's only 8 years old, is pretty badly tarnished with acid rain and, you know, the weather conditions here in New Jersey. So I called the VA office on Warren Street, and you can get, for your veteran, a new placard. They don't automatically give them out. I thought they did, but they're not automatic. I think the flags are, but the placards are not unless you ask for one. There's no charge. You just call them, and they'll have it for you. If you have a veteran, you know, buried in a local cemetery, I hope it lasts at least 8 years, but they are available at no charge. Well, there's a lot of veterans that you know need to be remembered, and it's nice to see the old faded ones, but this will go up. My dad's birthday is Christmas Eve. No, I'm sorry, New Year's Eve. This year he would have been 100, so I'm going to put this up so he'll have a nice placard for the new year. If you have a veteran in your family and you'd like to recognize them at the same time, just go to Warren Street and go to the Veterans Association, and they'll be glad to do that. And that's all I have. All right, we have several ordinances for introduction. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Kevin, we have the best practices in DCA. Each of you got a handout. Kevin, you want to give us a summary on that?
Sure, absolutely. The best practices came about probably about 7 or 8 years ago. The state of New Jersey, through the Department of Community Affairs, provides a list of questions. Some of the questions are the same annually. A lot of them do change, and they require the municipality to review them and answer them to ensure that the municipality is in the business of conducting best practices. They generally revolve around procurement practices, personnel practices. This year they spent a lot of time on the questions related to cybersecurity and the ARP dollars and the use of those dollars. We do answer them, and we answer those, and they have to be submitted prior to this meeting. I provided you a list of all of them so you have them, and really what it comes down to is a scoring mechanism so that if you don't score well, the state of New Jersey will hold back certain aid to the municipality until you either comply or you don't, and they'll have it. So for instance, the scoring that we achieved, that the Somerville achieved, is the number 23. Anything over 15, you retain all 100% of your aid. 11 through 14, you'll lose, you know, a percentage of it, and that's the way it works. Instead of going into all the details of it, because I know we have a packed house today, Mayor, I'll leave it with the council so they're aware of what the staff has filed. It is required that we do mention this at a public meeting and let the public know that such best practices scoring sheet is available to the public at any time throughout the year. It will be something that is posted on the borough's website under the finance page, and you'll see several years for that. So that's where we're at with that.
Is there any one particular item or items that we need to address?
There wasn't anything that we could address at this time. There was things that we need to address, but it's going to be addressed later in the year. So in those particular areas, you don't receive a deficiency for that. It just becomes a 0-point system. So for instance, the ARP money, we have not spent that yet. Because again, we're still deciding on exactly what the money will be used for. I mean, we're leaning towards a lot of sanitary infrastructure improvements. But the state recognizes that it's not needed to spend yet. So there was a lot of questions related to that really were not applicable yet. I'm sure when they appear next year, they'll be more applicable. Some of the areas that we did pick up some additional points were this year we changed our technology agency, right? So we went to a private entity. We moved away from interlocal law. Interlocal helps us on points. The private entity performs work that the interlocal did not. So we have a lot of cybersecurity training that the municipalities, that the employees have to take. Those came into play in the core competencies of this. So we did get some advantages there. So, you know, and we'll continue, you know, this is kind of a living document that throughout the year we'll look at to see if there's something that we were not able to answer at this time that we'll actually be able to become more proficient later on in the year. And that's kind of it in a summary.
Okay. All right, our second item for discussion, Station Road. We had some problems with Station Road, people not receiving their mail. Because evidently Station Road also exists in Branford. So people were getting mail not delivered, getting packages not delivered. And we can ask Kevin to discuss with the Postal Service the most efficient remedy. And Kevin, you want to report where we have wound up with that?
Sure. Colin Driver and I met with, along with the attorneys in Fulton Homes, with the post office. The direction that was provided at the last meeting here was that if we can keep the name of the road, keep the name of the road. So fortunately, it worked out that well. So as that way, so Station Road will remain. The thing that will change in order to eliminate that issue was that the homes over in Somerville Development will start with a 4-digit and on Station Road. So instead of having, you know, you'll start with number 1,000, and that'll be the way they proceed. And they're fine with that. It works out. Branchburg, their Station Road only goes up to I think 148 right now it was.
Yeah, but there was some that were in the 600.
Well, today, this morning I learned that they had some additional, because originally they said if you just start at 200, we're good. So everybody's on board. The residents who have moved into those locations are fine with those changes. So it seems like we've resolved it with very little effort.
How many homeowners were affected?
I think there were 5.
Well, currently there's 5. In total, it's 3 buildings, so
It's
about 20 residences ultimately.
So not too cumbersome, since we
No.
put it early. All right, we have several ordinances for introduction only. First one is 2655-21-1115, repealing ordinance 2303 in full, regulating political contributions to local political candidates and office holders, and local campaign committees for business entities and professional business entities. Motion.
I move the table.
Second.
This is to table the first ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, 2655. Council members Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Caluta,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell,
Yes.
Randy Pitts,
Yes.
Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed,
Yes.
Would you like this on the next meeting, or because keep in mind, we
We
have,
can't straddle the year,
we can't straddle the year,
and
so.
we have 2 meetings in December.
We can talk later about it.
Okay.
Can we ask a question about those two?
It's introduction only now. Save it for public.
Okay.
Well, you can bring that up in public. All right, our next ordinance, 2656-21-1115, repealing ordinance 2304 in full, which regulates political contributions to local political candidates and office holders and developers entering into agreements for redevelopment projects. Motion?
I move to table.
Second.
Council members Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Cavuta.
Yes.
Tom Mitchell.
Yes.
Randy Pitts. Roger Vroom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
All right, so you'll discuss the procedure. All right, we have several ordinances up for hearing and adoption. We can obviously take them one at a time. I'll do my best to read and explain the area at which we're going to consider, and then we'll have public hearing on each one, and then vote on each one, because they are slightly different and unique. And Jeremy, you got it, if I have one foul.
Sure.
All right, so the first one, 2651-21-1101, amending Chapter 102, Land Use and Development, Article 11, zoning 102, creating an R5 Townhouse Apartment Residential District, Block 14301, Lots 1 and 8, Block 101, Lots 1 and 3, Block 147, Lot 1. And just to clarify, the R5 proposed zone would be the north side of Brookside Avenue, between Mountain Avenue and Mercer Street. Motion for public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Council members Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Cavuta.
Yes.
Tom Mitchell.
Yes.
Randy Pitts.
Yes.
Roger Vroom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
All right, before I open public hearing, I'll try to run this as I did the last time we had a large crowd. I'll go row by row. Everyone will have their chance to speak. Please keep your comments directed to myself and try to limit your comments to 5 minutes. And public hearing on first, I'll start to my right, I'll go across. Yes, sir. Name and address for the record.
Hi, Chris Cutler, 64 Mountain Avenue. Take your time, there's no hurry. We don't need to make any changes, and the town can't afford to make mistakes. We have one of the highest tax rates in the county. Efforts at redevelopment where there were promises that there would be not many children and things like that have backfired on other towns. Kentucky comes to mind. Their tax rates have gone up a lot because of rising school taxes related to development. Anything related to zoning should pass certain criteria because we just don't have latitude to make mistakes. One, it should be beneficial relative to the cost to the town for municipal taxes, that the cost of, the projected cost of servicing the people there shouldn't be more than what the tax revenue is. The same holds for school taxes. We should really think very carefully that maybe our projections about the number of children, if any new development coming in could be underestimated, and we just don't want to be like what happened with McCutcheon and other towns with regards to that. The third thing is if we have any rezoning and it may cause more building, we can think carefully about our creepy infrastructure and whether the infrastructure can handle it. We've had people coming in before the town council, the town council probably addressed it very well, where there was concerns about sewage backing into people's homes and things like that. So if we're going to do anything, I know there was discussion with regard to the zoning board about rezoning to create more density. My opinion is that it's a mistake. We've created tremendous density in this town in the last few years with some wonderful new developments coming in. But I feel that we fulfilled our responsibility to create density, and we should get out of our minds that we should be trying to create even more density in what's actually a very dense town around here. And then the fourth thing, and may not be particular to this thing, is let's just take our time and not think about things that may embarrass us in the future, frankly. You know, that we've got flood zones in the area. We just don't need to build structures in flood zones. I realize you're talking about the north side of Brookside, which didn't get flooded as much as the south side, but I understand these conversations are connected. So those are the things I want to bring forth to you with regard to whatever you're going to discuss with regard to improving something. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Second row. Mr. Devine.
Bernie Devine, 215 North Bridge Street. I'm speaking as a resident concerned about my neighbors tonight. I'm not representing the planning board. I'm just speaking about what we need to do as a community. These four ordinances, and while you're taking them separately, they need to be considered together because it's an overall plan to get people out of the water, to make people safe. We currently have, and the complex lost 160 units. That's significant. That's a significant number of people displaced. The impact on the school system is going to be relatively minor. The annual fluctuations.
Sorry.
Thanks, Paula.
You're welcome.
The annual fluctuations in school enrollment are going to be more than what happens. And we know this because we've studied it here in town. We've done our own studies. What's important is getting people out of the water. We're going to put them in buildings that are safe, buildings that have sprinklers, elevators, generators, and those buildings that are in the floodplain are going to be elevated and going to be connected to dry land. You're going to be connected to areas where emergency services can get in, ambulances can get in, firemen can get in, and people can get out. They can get out and go to the grocery store. They can pick up the supplies they need. That's part of this overall plan. And the plan is to concentrate density in this particular R5 area and make it not so dense in the R4, which is south of Brookside, and the R7, which is on Cliff Street. And I have to tell you that I've witnessed it many times over the last 50 years. I've been here for a long time, and it started in 1971, in my memory. And in the last 18 years, those apartments have gone underwater 6 times. When are we going to stop doing this? When are we going to enable the owner we now have an owner who wants to improve it. He wants to make people safe. When are we going to stop doing this? Thank you.
Thank you. Second round?
Sure, sure.
Good evening, Mike Kerwin, 8 Abbott Drive, Somerville, New Jersey, member of the Development Committee. I want to echo what Barney said. I think after the hurricane effect, I walked the town a lot. Horrified. Walked not only in front of Brookside and east side of Cliff Street apartments, but behind them, and saw the human suffering that was involved. I thought I'd never see that before. And Somerville was, like post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, it was just really, really, really bad. And two things came to mind was, if New Jersey American Water hadn't hardened their water distribution plant, we would have lost water. So they made an investment to harden that infrastructure. We, talking to County Commissioner, the guy from PSCG, basically confirmed that if they hadn't invested in hardening our electric stations, we would have lost power. So think about what that would have been like coming out of Irma with not only the flood damage that we experienced, but no power and no water. That would have been a true catastrophe. So I, promised myself that just like we responded to prior hurricanes, to do whatever I can to make sure that
decent quality of life, just basic humanity is extended to our Somerville residents, so they don't have to go through this again. I think that's what we're really talking about. So we have a unique historic opportunity here, because by the way things turned out, a good portion of the properties that were hit the hardest are owned by one entity. One entity that we have a track record of working with. So we're, in one shot, by doing the right thing, we can effectively improve the quality of life for many, many Somerville residents in a really good way. By giving them decent housing that's going to be drier, safer, more sustainable, and just better. So I think we should just move ahead with that goal in mind, and just make it a really great step forward to improve the quality of life for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you skipped someone in the front row.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gina Stravic, 16 Grand Avenue, Chair of the Environmental Commission. There's people smarter than me that can talk to the storm water, the building, the redevelopment. Certainly we want what's best for town. But, you know, Kevin spent time talking about best practices in administrative and government, and we also need best practices in terms of communication to residents. There's been no transparent behaviors around these things. The two ordinances that were tabled tonight leave people in question. Number two, the lack of citizen participation in having discussions, community meetings about this redevelopment project. And number three, best practices in terms of the environment, which we represent as members of the Environmental Commission. There are best practices for stormwater, which we tried to work on and unsuccessfully got anything changed. For this project, for green infrastructure. So I think that redevelopment is fine, but we also need to work to higher expectations, not just for safety, but also for the environment, for better practices. And if we want to truly be a progressive community, that's part of it. Thank you.
Deirdre was empty, wasn't waiting to listen at all. I sit on the planning board and I'm speaking as full because I have the information. I'm all for rezoning those properties and taking down what is old housing and putting in new. That is not the problem with what I see. What I see is we're trying to push this through at the end of the year very quickly, and there's some major, I think, issues that need to be worked out before this becomes law. One of the things is the coverage of the site, which is 90% being allotted, and the density, which is 55 units per acre. That's the density of Ventures Memorial. And as a planning board member with SAC for a long time, we put our density downtown by the railroad station because that's where it belongs. It doesn't belong in residential neighborhoods along Parkland and by the brooks. So as a planning board, we looked at a compromise, and we thought, looking at Kirby Avenue development, which the whole neighborhood met and agreed on, is a higher density than usual, but not 55 units per acre with coverage of 90% of the site, which means 10% of the site will be green. I think that's ridiculous, going from garden apartments to 10% green. And lastly, you cannot rely on this developer to be there. These ordinances can pass, and you can turn around and sell all this property, and we might not get such an ethical developer coming in and buying the property. So we're not supposed to be zoning anything for a particular developer. We're getting very close to being spot zoning. And while we worked with this developer and they love Somerville, we cannot count on them being here forever. And we don't know if that company is going to stay with us once the zoning is changed. So the decisions have to be made for the good of the people of Somerville and for what happens in the future, and should not be rushed through. This really will not make a difference to the people who have lost their homes right now. We'll lose more homes when they take down all the rest of the garden apartments while they're building the new. So that argument is there, but it's not a good one. And so I just really would like you to consider the details of these laws that you're going to put in as ordinances, and wonder if you cannot take it into next year, have open meetings with the neighborhood people who live in that neighborhood and use that neighborhood before
We go with such high densities, and when I asked where those numbers came from, no one could give me a logical explanation for that large density. So, that's basically all.
Go to the third row, we'll start on my right.
We both will speak at the end of the ordinances.
I wasn't going to speak, I'm sorry, I'm part of the area, 81 Center Street. I wasn't going to speak because everything I've been thinking, people have already said. Part of the ordinance I saw when I was reading it was about the affordable housing, or whatever they're calling it now. And part of it was, well, we could put them in a different spot. We could put these houses where people who qualify for affordable housing somewhere else. That is not what we want. Bernie had talked about it when we were doing the vetting for the townhouses, and at that point, were going to be apartments on the landfill. We were going to salt the affordable housing components in with the other ones. Grant, you and I had a conversation with Jane, we had a meeting right here with Chief Manning, Bobby Johnson, Les Floyd, Wally Gant. And one of the things that you said, you were not into social engineering by putting people who are in the affordable area in a separate spot. You wanted to sort it all in. I think we're doing this hastily. I understand what Mike and Bernie were talking about, but it is spot zoning. We're doing this for one person, and he's going to do a good job. But I think we should go back to the drawing board and work on it, not just rush it through. And introduced 2 weeks ago, now you want to do a final? I think we are rushing this. I think we should really think about it, and maybe set up another committee.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Bill Sisko. I live on 37 Eastern Avenue. I apologize for my tire, but I just got out about the meeting, so I came in real quick. Couple things I wanted to mention. I was a member of the Gaston Avenue redevelopment project, and that whole team, we talked about what do we want in our neighborhood on Gaston Avenue, and we really wanted to maintain our neighborhood feel. And so one of the things that we said was we wanted to limit the size of the buildings to 3 stories. We wanted the downtown to be the downtown area with taller buildings. And looking at this ordinance, I see maximum building height 5 stories, 60 feet, if apartments or townhouses, or whatever exactly that means. And I feel that any buildings taller than 3 stories in a residential area is just going to get rid of that small town neighborhood feel that we have. And I really implore you to consider that, to keep the downtown and keep our neighborhood feeling and looking like a real neighborhood. I think that this goes against that. Secondly, we talked about the marijuana issue a couple months ago, and one of the reasons I believe you made a decision that you did was to avoid congestion. And if you increase the height and increase the number of units, you're really going to make a lot more people, a lot more cars on the road. And so then you're looking at a safety issue. You're looking at a lot more people, a lot more cars, a lot more pedestrians, all within this whole area. It's a real safety issue. We already have safety issues with pedestrians. And this is just going to possibly make that worse. So those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, back row. Yes, sir.
Eric Bodkin, 325 William Street. I have a couple of questions actually. When you're planning a development and there's going to be less permeable area, is there any consideration to the extra water runoff in other areas?
Well, in general, when a project comes into the planning board, one of the components is stormwater management. And the applicant has to demonstrate to the planning board and the planner and the engineer how the stormwater will be managed. There's a sanitary component and a stormwater component. And they have calculations that they submit to to show how that water is going to be handled. The rule of thumb, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, is that the water leaving the property cannot be any worse than it was pre-construction.
That's correct.
So each project has to stand on its own in terms of how it will deal with the water that is generated from its site. So this doesn't address that because that's part of the site plan, which the respective developer would come in once the blueprint, for what you can do is established.
And when you're planning more residential units, obviously that affects the sewer system. Is there any consideration to what that might do when sewers back up?
Again, that's a flow issue that would have to be decided upon at the planning board level with that application. They have to show that they have the capacity to get their effluent to the main storm and sanitary sewer line. And then there'd be calculations, and we rely on the authority as well. That would have to go to the county planning board as well as to the sewage department. So there are experts that would look at that so that a system can be designed to take care of it.
Okay. And the last question. Are there any other plans to try to reduce flooding rather than just try to compensate for it?
That's not part of this ordinance in terms of what we can do. That's probably at the Army Corps of Engineers and the county planning board level. I don't know if we have decided as a local body what we're going to do. It's basically a project-driven decision.
It sounds like you're taking care of a couple of sections, but the rest of us are going to just have to go through this again if it happens.
I can't answer that question. Thank you. Last row? Yes, ma'am.
That's what I'm here for.
It's empty, it's empty. Good evening, Ray Larry Cleveland, 34 Grant Avenue. I am a member of the Environmental Commission and the Planning Board, but I'm also here as a citizen. With respect to the 4 ordinances.
Just please reserve your comment to the first one, R5.
Well, I want to step aside from that. They're all interrelated. So, we can do this all day long.
In deference to you, Larry, I'll give you a little left.
But they're all together. They're all interrelated, like everyone said before, the same owner, and they're all interrelated. They're all through town. They kind of have to be considered together, in my opinion. I understand what Bernie said, and I agree. And what Mr. Kerwin said, and I agree. And I also agree with what Ms. Swah said and Mr. Rizzi said. And Mr. Dare, I think we're moving too fast. I think that the developer or the owner has a right to change things. The planning board recommended, and I hope you guys got the report, that said we were recommending at a Kirby Avenue level or a Haynes Avenue level of density. This is a huge change in the town. It's a complete upheaval. If we took one of those zones and a developer came in and said they wanted to do that, they'd have to notice the whole neighborhood. It'd be this whole thing. We'd be here for weeks, like McDonald's or the hospital or any other major development. This is almost like we're coming in very quick, and this is a major change. I think we should have a Kirby Avenue style discussion, stakeholder meetings, big stakeholder meetings for landfill. People can't even see the landfill from downtown now they can, but at the time, you could put anything you want over there. Yeah, but we had stakeholder meetings, we talked about it for months, years, in certain circumstances. I think we should take the time. I certainly understand they want to redevelop their property, but I think that the density of 55 units per acre is a lot. The Somerville Seniors Building is 68 units. It's a 12-story building. We want 55. That's what the proposal is. I think it's a mistake. I think we should be trying to work with them, certainly, to bring it to something that is more in character with our town. Visually, and also just the impact of other people said about additional traffic. I know they're gonna have to go through traffic studies and things like that, but I think we really should think about it a little bit more. That's my, thank you.
Yes.
Somerville. I'd like to know how the ordinance was developed, what committees it went to, and was there unanimous approval?
The redevelopment committee, which consists of myself, Dr. Grady, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Kerwin, Mr. Lovato, and my professional, we deliberated, we talked about the ordinance, we outreached to the developer for some input on his part. The recommended ordinance was given to council, was introduced at our last meeting. It's up for adoption tonight. That's generally the process that we go through with redevelopment. I'm sorry, it was referred to the planning board after we introduced it. The planning board deliberated it at last week's meeting, sent their recommendations to us, which we have in advance of tonight's meeting for us to consider before we take action.
So it didn't go to the environmental commission?
No, but you have a representative on the planning board. And
Correct, correct.
And he had
So we
ample
had-
opportunity to.
On the
have input.
environmental commission, and we had our meeting last week, and that was the first time we heard about it. And we had a lively discussion about it. Larry brought the discussion back to the planning board. But I feel like we are being cut out of the process. This is a really important development in town, and everybody should be a part of the discussion. That's all I have.
Thank you for your comment. Yes, sir.
Hi, Al Forestis, 323 East Main Street. We did have, I don't want to speak for the planning board here. Although I am a member, I'm speaking as a citizen. There was a discussion at the planning board meeting, and I don't believe there was concerns to agree with what's on the text.
I believe the recommendation to send those amendments to the council, I believe, is unanimous. I don't have the minutes in front of me.
Okay,
But I'm pretty sure.
We discussed having further discussions about less density.
I believe in my career,
And I stand corrected.
I think the recommendation to send it back here with the printed text we have tonight, I believe that was unanimous.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
But the recommendation is for less density.
I know. There are two wavelengths here, Dennis.
All right.
Yeah, we decided to speak now.
Hi, I'm Mika. I'm a resident of 70 Brookside.
Last name, please?
Mika Deitch, D-I-T-C-H.
Thank you.
I want to thank you council members for giving us the opportunity to speak on this proposed project. I, like many residents of Brookside Gardens, am concerned about the unjust gentrification that is taking place in our community. Jack Morris has a history of taking advantage of tax-based funding for low-income housing, and in return offering up neglected and sometimes outright dangerous housing to vulnerable community members. Now he's using a natural disaster to kick those same residents out in favor of increasing rents and gentrifying the small areas of this town that remain affordable. The flooding may be the final straw pushing Somerville to the brink of a housing crisis. Where are all the lower-income families supposed to go now that they've lost their homes and can't afford what it's going to replace them? Before living in Somerville, I lived in New Brunswick for a while, a town in which Jack Morris used his close personal relationships with multiple corrupt New Brunswick mayors, one of whom was later jailed for corruption and fraud, to exponentially increase gentrification while reducing quality of life. I spent a lot of time working with many unhoused community members in New Brunswick, and almost all of them have been living in New Brunswick their whole lives until their city council allowed developers and slumlords to take over and replace their homes with shoddy luxury apartments. Anyone who has been to New Brunswick knows about the large amount of people that are left unhoused despite all the empty homes sitting around unused. Is this what we want for Somerville? For our caring and compassionate community to allow our neighbors and friends to be made homeless by a wealthy slumlord who for years has taken our taxes to fund decrepit affordable housing? Whether the East Cliff Street apartments are torn down for new apartments or new parks, or just fixed up from the flooding, we cannot let Brookside Properties leave its lower income residents with no affordable alternative. We have been in front of you before, pleading for help with our unsafe standards of housing. You are all aware of Brookside Properties' nefarious business conduct, from requiring NDAs for security deposits that they still haven't returned 2 months after people were kicked out of their homes, or the complete lack of aid and accountability and information for those affected by the flood. People today are talking about how this company is one we can trust, and if it's sold to some other company, maybe we can't trust them. I want to raise the point that we can't trust Jack Morris. He just screws over the towns he's in and makes them worse off. How can we trust that they will not continue to exploit the town's kindness to make obscene riches off of some of our most vulnerable community members? As the elected city council, please show your constituents that you actually care about their well-being and will not just listen to whatever big businessmen ask of you. What plans do we have in place to protect the low-income residents from the issues I have outlined today? Because I know the papers talk all about how many low-income housing units have to go to low-income versus middle-income, and how many have to be affordable to this group. But nothing states that a certain amount actually has to be affordable. There's nothing saying that 30% of the housing has to be affordable, or that it has to be under, like, specific amounts, or that it has to match the amount that the people who were just kicked out of their homes because of the flood can actually afford. Because regardless of what this council decides, right now, we as members of Brookside Properties residents have only each other, and we will continue to stand together against injustices perpetrated by Jack Morris and his business associates. Do not let them continue to cause more harm to our great town by passing this plan without specific requirements for truly affordable and safe housing. Thank you.
Hi again. Always lovely meeting you guys here. Julie Montanari, former resident of 76 East Cliff Street. My lovely, wonderful partner summed up most of what I was going to say on behalf, once again, of my neighbors and those who were deeply affected by the flooding. But after hearing the rest of my community tonight, I think we all can agree our big issues are, one, are we rushing this? Are we going to go back into a train wreck that we've been dealing with? I'm hearing over the years, we've had multiples of the same issue. So yeah, I agree. Let's stop, take a breather, and get more of the community in. I did have the honor of sitting during the planning board meeting, and I appreciate that. I'd also like to thank Mr. Lee for announcing that. Fortunately, as always, me being the only one available and able to due to the flooding, I was there. There are more concerns I am hearing from the people who used to live in these areas where we're talking about these ordinances. And it's not just the renters themselves, I'm hearing homeowners now. And the biggest thing is, what does that make Somerville? Do we look like, as we've heard, do we look like a Metuchen? Will we look like a New Brunswick? Are we trying to chase people away from our towns? Or are we trying to bring them in? Heartland would be fantastic. You know how many families we have in town with small children? I, as a mother myself, can speak on that. I grew up in Watchung, where the woods were part of my childhood. Let's maybe consider that instead of, tearing down my home and rebuilding it. Yes, East Cliff Street had many memories and great places, but let's make use of that. Instead of forcing people to go through tragic events repeatedly, no matter how much you build up, it's a repeat to happen. How about we consider the small houses that have been in the town for years, family homes, who were here since the founding? How about small businesses? What is Somerville known for? Can we talk about this right now? We're known for being a welcoming community, a community who was built by small business owners, families who have been here since the founding of the town. And right now, all I'm hearing, and from what I'm hearing from the people behind me and others who have spoke to me, is that we're forgetting our roots. And this is not okay. So maybe we should slow down and think and be that town that goes, hey, let's not be in Metuchen. Let's not be in New Brunswick. And then, pardon my language, but let's not be the assholes. Because that's what we're all sounding like right now. Sadly, there's no other word. Because we're neglecting what this town is built on, what is around our town. Yes, it'd be great to build big and up. Why? For economic purposes. Let's be honest. You see how Westfield's building up and other towns such as that. They are bringing more in. But you're also forgetting our core values of family, immigrants, small business owners. When you do this, you're telling them you're not welcome. Again, I appreciate the moment at the planning meeting. It made sense, but I am speaking for the people. Like the Lorax said, I speak for the trees, I speak for Somerville, and I speak for the community, and this is what we're saying. Don't take away what the Somerville community means by making us this giant robotic-looking town, because that is what happens every time we build bigger buildings. Let's bring home back to Somerville. And that's all I have to say for now.
All right, can I have a motion to close the public hearing on this ordinance only?
So moved.
Second.
Council members Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Kabuda,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell,
Yes.
Randy Pitts,
Yes.
Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes. Before I entertain a motion, question for the attorney. We have a proposed ordinance in front of us. You could have a motion to adopt as is listed. You could have a motion to table. What if the council wanted to consider changes? Would we have to defeat this ordinance, come back with a new ordinance that incorporated modifications to this?
The short answer is it depends on the changes. If you were going to make minor changes, a 10-foot setback instead of a 15-foot setback, that would be permitted today at this table now as part of the adoption. So you could adopt the ordinance as amended. If you were going to make a more significant change, then it would require a republication.
How about a height reduction?
No, a reduction would be permitted.
No, I'm saying.
By amendment, I mean.
By amendment.
Yes, a reduction, yes.
Density.
A reduction.
And a reduction.
That would be, sorry, yes, that would be permitted. The theme I'm developing here is that if you're making it a greater change than what's proposed, then you would need to renotice that. If you're reducing the change, then you would need to renotice.
Well, we would have to know tonight what reductions we were voting on.
You would make, someone would make an amendment and change it from X density to Y density. You would vote on whether that amendment was accepted, and then the amended ordinance would be then voted.
We wouldn't have to republish.
If you were reducing the density, no.
Wait, we don't have a motion. No, I just wanted some clarification.
Bear in mind, I'm sorry, Peter.
No.
Bear in mind as well, you certainly, if someone wants to table it, that's an appropriate vote at any time. Bear in mind that an ordinance needs to be adopted, when it's been introduced, it needs to be adopted in the same year.
Right, and we have this meeting and then 2 meetings in December, otherwise we would start the clock again in January.
Yes.
All right, motion to table.
All right.
Randy seconded.
There's a vote.
All right, so the motion on the floor.
Can we speak about the motion?
Yes, it's a legitimate motion. Tom, would you like to speak since you made the motion to introduce?
Yeah,
To table.
the table, yeah, I think that we have to go back and look through the whole thing. We've got a significant set of amount of edits that have been suggested by the planning board that have not been incorporated into this. We've got language in here that is rather extreme. 55 units per acre in all but one of the, well, sorry, I should only be talking about this one.
Thank you.
55 units per acre in this one ordinance. 90% impervious cover, which is extreme, and which the Environmental Commission has objected strenuously to. And all these things have to be reconsidered, and I don't think we're in a position to do that tonight.
Mr. Pitts, I'll call on you since you made a second. Would you like to comment? Everything that comes.
Just to keep it short, you've heard from them, our people, they confirm. Mr. Bill?
I have to agree with Mr. Fitz, you know, we have to look at this, and these are the notes from the planning board, and I don't see that incorporated in what's going through. We have to make sure that we make use of the people that we appoint to these positions, the boards that we have. We just made a pitch in the beginning of the meeting to have people voluntarily part of these groups. They have a right to be heard, and it has a right to be amended in such form. We ask them to be part of these groups, they have to feel that their voice matters. And so I understand both sides of it.
So notice it. Mrs. Kabur?
As a resident of the Southbridge Garden Apartments for the first 15 years of my life here in Somerville, I agree. We really have to look at this. I feel for people in apartments. It took us 15 years to save enough money to buy a house, so I think we need to look at this a little bit closer.
Dr. Brady, as member of the redevelopment committee, if you care to comment.
It's very easy to do nothing, and that's what we're doing. First of all, the idea of bringing the garden apartments into various zones was not done to benefit a developer. It was done to develop the borough of Somerville. We had a terrible situation on East Cliff Street that everyone seems to have forgotten right now. Oh, well, you know, they're now sitting empty, abandoned, and that's just the way life is. We have to worry about density on one hand, affordability on the other. But who the hell's worrying about what's happening on East Cliff Street?
Not you.
And the rest of Brookside. The problem I have with this whole issue is this was a zoning ordinance to try to give clarification to what has been done in the past or not done. A young lady said, we have a history of Somerville. It's a wonderful history. Flood now, abandonment, flood abandonment. More apartments get flooded, more homes get flooded. And this is a chronic history of Somerville within a flood area. It ain't stormwater, people. It is the river comes up. When the Army Corps of Engineers puts barricades up in towns beyond us, the water comes up. It will continue to come up. We do not have a flood mitigation plan. This is as close as we're going to get to it. If it doesn't happen. I live in two groups of people. One group says more affordable housing, another group says density. Mr. Adair mentioned that I am definitely against social engineering, and I am terribly against it because I came from an area where social engineering killed the city of Newark. We do not want to be another town that warehouses people. If we look at affordable housing, we have to look at density. If we look at density, we have to look at affordable housing. Now, if I have to choose one or the other, at this point, I have to say I would be willing to scrap the affordable housing because it's not required. What is required is a plan that's going to give the borough the opportunity to have flood mitigation, to stop the problems that have been happening in this town. Brookside was built almost the time I was born, for heaven's sake. We have to get off of it. So it's very easy to do nothing. And this is what concerns, yes, it's the end of the year. This may fall over into another year. The problem I still have is we are looking at this as a zoning issue, first and foremost. And it's not a social issue. It's being made a social issue. And that's all well and good, but keep one thing in mind. The rain is still going to come. Just for a point of information, ladies and gentlemen, the amount of taxes that East Cliff Street would pay if it was a viable operation, and keep that in mind, the finance chairman, I hate to say this, but the East Cliff Street apartment pays $188,079.47 in taxes. I just hope the people in the audience and the people at this table are willing to absorb that loss. That's all I have.
Mr. President, you just want to work. Great. I want my voice to be heard, so I'll take off my mask for the first time since this pandemic in a public meeting.
Fred, you still have it on? Oh, that's your beard.
My winter growth, but I digress. I am very troubled with how this came about. I don't disagree that we have to make sure that if there is going to be building, that it has to be done properly and looked into properly, studied properly. A little myth on why it's being rushed through. Let's do it right the first time. So that's all I have to say about that. At the last meeting, if some of you watched, I know some folks did reach out to me on this one. I asked Colin a simple yes or no question. At the meetings, Mr. Morris with the developer, the redevelopment committee, were any members of the Brookside properties at those meetings? And the answer was no. Julie and Nico, thank you for coming out to these meetings because you enlighten us about your situation. And finally, I really think, in due difference to my colleague about affordable housing, I think we are missing the opportunity to have some affordable housing in this town. Let's be the trendsetter then. We don't have it now, let's be the trendsetter. And that is all I have.
Thank you. All right. I looked at the recommendations of the planning board. I am somewhat troubled by the mass and the density that we originally proposed. Yes, it's about money, Mr. Brady, with deference to you. I sat in your position as finance chairman for many years myself. I think we lose nothing by being a little cautious. It is the end of the year. I don't think that has anything to do with it. Whether we table this and reintroduce it the first of the year, we're still going to have the same issues to deal with. I think there's got to be some common ground between how high, how dense, how much paving, and how many people. I'd love to see them rebuilt. I'd love to see a range of affordability. I know in my particular case, I've wanted to buy a home in Somerville in 1978, and I had the grand choice of 3. That's all that was available in my price range at the time. And it was a tough decision because we really wanted to live here. And I know people struggle with that. 30% of your income is about the going rate now, and it's only going up. So I think by taking a step back, we're still committed to getting these properties rebuilt safely. If I had to vote, I would probably vote yes to table, with the caveat that we can't wait forever. We are the governing body, we are tasked with decision making. People in those seats put us in these seats, and we have to exercise that responsibility at some point. And I think we lose nothing by gathering some more facts, perhaps increasing the outreach, and make it something we can all be proud of, but still keep people safe. At that, I will call.
Your Honor, I would ask that you set a time frame for this to occur. I don't want this to be a never-ending tale. I sense that it could very easily go on and on and on. So I would like you to set a deadline for this to be finished, for the ordinance to be crafted or not crafted. But I definitely think we need a timetable here.
I will defer that decision to our redevelopment committee. I don't want to make it unilateral. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor for this ordinance only, table. Kevin, roll call.
Council members, Granville Brady.
I pass.
Yes, is to table the motion.
Thank you.
I pass.
Council members, Jane Kabuta.
Yes.
Tom Mitchell.
Yes.
Randy Pitts.
Yes.
Roger Vroom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
Granville Brady.
No. All right. I need a motion now.
May I suggest?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Given that all the other three ordinances are part of the same comprehensive scheme, that you just make one motion to table the remaining three ordinances and take them.
I move to
But
table.
hold on one second. We do have a public hearing advertised for
Yeah.
each one of those.
Yeah.
So we're entitled to a public
Yeah.
hearing.
But it's this,
But I'll ask for a unique response. All right, so I need a motion for a public hearing on 2652-21-1101, amending Chapter 102, Land Use and Redevelopment, Article 11, Zoning 102, creating an R6 Townhouse Apartment Residential Complex, Block 102, Lot 8, Block 105, Lot 10. R6 is the Brown Street and Orchard Street Complex. Motion to open public hearing. So moved.
Second.
Council members Granville Brady.
Yes.
Jane Cavuto.
Yes.
Tom Mitchell. Randy Pitts.
Yes.
Roger Vroom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
Public hearing on this ordinance, and I would ask you to, if you have a statement, make it a unique one that has not been ground that is not yet been covered. And again, this is for Brown and Orchard only.
Yeah, this is Tim Von Shumling, 42 North Middle Street. And I would just like to point out the track record of the developer, and in particular what happened with the land that was bought by him on Main Street. There were great plans for buildings to be built, and what happened was, as we all know, one building was built, and then the empty lot just sat there for years and years. I know personally because that was my route walking from home to downtown. I passed this empty lot. It was an eyesore. It was an embarrassment. And it got worse because of the fence that was put up, keeping anybody out, not to mention the fact that it was used, as far as I can tell, to store earth-moving and construction equipment that the developer was probably using in other places and other material. And this went on for years and years and years. So if you think that he's going to be building all these buildings right away, that is not going to happen. That's not his mode of operation. You're going to find one building built, rented, probably not the affordable housing building, and the rest is just going to sit there for who knows how many years. Thank you.
Yes.
Robert Weinberger, 42 North Middle Street, Somerville, New Jersey. I would also like to speak to the developer, who's probably a wonderful person and probably has our best interests at stake. I would just like to say that while I'm not anti-development, as some people have portrayed me to be in the past, I feel like we have to be very responsible, and I have to agree with the statements that people said. I just want to tell all of you that a man who wears $3,000 Italian leather shoes does not have Somerville's best interest at heart. And as far as some of the comments that Mr. Brady made, Dr. Brady made, I think it's really important that we do not rush into anything. I think that it's really important that we do nothing, because no matter what, runoff, streams, 4 or 5 cars in the brook overturned, leaking gas and oil are pollutants, bottom line. And until we can all agree that unless we have clean air and clean water, nothing is more important. Not your grandchildren, not my grandchildren, without clean air and clean water. And this is definitely an impact, and this developer will definitely impact those things. Thank you.
Yes, Deirdre Rosinski, 108 North Middle Street. In the ordinance, they use the term affordable housing, but there is no definition in any of these ordinances or anywhere that we could find of what that means. And I'm wondering, does not that have to be defined more specifically if you're going to put it in an ordinance and speak to affordable housing?
The short answer is no, it wouldn't have to be. The ordinance contemplates that there'll be a developer's agreement, which you know is sort of a contract between the developer and the municipality as to what they will build and what they won't build. So those details would be put in that developer's agreement, which would be enforced.
And who would decide those?
Consultation with the planning board as part of the site plan application, as well as the input of the council. It's the council that actually enters into the agreement with the developer.
So the planning board would decide what affordable housing is defined as, or the council would
It's ultimately up to the council, but the initial application, as you know, goes to the planning board as by way of the site.
So I think it would be clearer to everybody if it was defined initially, it could be tweaked, but it should be defined initially in these ordinances rather than having this overall term of affordable housing, which to various people means various different things depending on where you're coming from.
All right, yes, sir.
We just start with comments. Dr. Brady, you mentioned some...
Name and address,
Oh,
please.
I'm sorry. Gene LaPelletier, 32 Ross Street. Dr. Brady, you mentioned this is a need to mitigate the flooding. I would like to make a comment that allowing 90% coverage on a large tract of land is absolutely the wrong direction to go. At our church, we couldn't pave a sidewalk area because we have too much land already that's solid. That allow 90% coverage in an area that does flood, I think that's not right. That should not be right.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Jeff Brandon, 32 Lisa Terrace. Following up on that comment, a lot of flooding occurs in the town because of what happened upstream of Somerville, and particularly Bridgewater. I'd like to know what engagement the council has with, say, Bridgewater, development, planning board, or council, or even Somerset County, to help mitigate or work on progressing this better than it has been or can be.
Well, the county planning board oversees projects within the area. We also have an agreement with Bridgewater, Mike, about the projects that would have impact on each of us.
When the market reaches a certain size, we have to notice for area in Bridgewater. We have to do the same thing.
Okay.
The number of units or the number of commercial size of the building. It's automatic notice.
Okay.
For the regional center.
Is there a way to engage publicly as a resident myself with what those maybe thresholds are or the decisions are made? Are you familiar at all with that?
It's right in the land use ordinance.
Okay.
You look at noticing, there's a whole paragraph that talks about size and when it triggers. We've noticed to rare it in Bridgewater.
Okay, gotcha.
It's online.
When you say online, where check on it?
The Somerville homepage, and then there's a link for the borough ordinances and land use ordinances, section 102, primarily the land use ordinances.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close public hearing on this ordinance. So moved.
Second.
Council members Granville Brady.
Yes.
Jane Cabuda.
Yes.
Tom Mitchell.
Yes.
Randy Pitts.
Yes.
Roger Vroom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes,
All right, I'll entertain a motion on this ordinance only.
motion to table. Second. I just would like to add, since the motion is the table is up, and just still trouble, council intro, planning board, supposed final adoption 2 weeks. That's all I have, Mayor.
Uh-oh. I didn't do that.
What did you
What's
say?
going on?
Sorry, I said council intro, planning board recommendations, supposed final approval only 2 weeks.
So you're objecting to the time frame?
Yeah.
Got it, sorry.
Sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
Once again, the
Again.
vote is a vote to table.
We have a motion and a second, and I will entertain unique comments only. I'll be the lead. Michael, is there anything in these proposed ordinances that is in conflict with the master plan?
No, it's not a conflict. It's consistent with the master plan being diversity now.
Okay.
Yeah, and the planning board report said that.
Okay, when I hear about 90% coverage, is that in the entire project, or it seems to me as if that is not necessarily true of all parts of this redevelopment project. Maybe I'm wrong. Does it, could you clarify that 90% coverage? Let's say East Cliff Street.
Well, you have, it's you take it for a lot. However, we're in the flood hazard zone, so there's regulations about covering there indeed.
Right, so it's not necessarily 90%, it could be something else.
Correct.
So we are not the final authority when it comes to that particular aspect of the impervious surface. DEP would have to weigh in on it.
DEP controls the flood hazard area.
Very good. Thank you very much. And again, we have a motion and a second. A yes vote would be to table this ordinance. Roll call, please.
Council members, Granville Brady,
No.
Jane Cavuta,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell,
Yes.
Randy Pitts,
Yes.
Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed,
Yes.
All right, ordinance 2653-21-1101, amending chapter 102, land use and development, article 11, zoning 102, creating an R4 townhouse apartment residential district, lot 143, lots 1 and 2, block 153, lots 3, 4, 16, 4, 17, 4.18, 4.19, 4.20, 4.21, the R4 zone. Is the apartment complex west of Mountain Avenue to the Borough line, and it's at its juncture with Bridgeport. Motion for public hearing on this ordinance.
Mayor, during the break, I looked up, I apologize because I forced you to go to the public. If the only motion on the table is, if the only motion is to table the ordinance, you wouldn't have to go to the public.
Well, we wouldn't know that before the hearing.
I know.
Well, but since the fall, you would essentially be slated for a public hearing later on, presumably. The public hearing.
I think we're almost done. Let's continue on. I'd like to, well, we organized it, I can. All right, so I have a motion for public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Council members Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Cavuta,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell, Randy Pitts,
Yes.
Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
Public hearing on the R4 zone west of Mountain Avenue. Again, please limit your comments and questions to unique points that have not yet been raised. Yes, Mr.
Mike Kerwin, 8 Denver Drive. Appreciate hearing the comments from my fellow neighbors and residents. Roger's points, this is a very big deal, and I do understand it's been rushed. I just want to say, listen, I've been around this town for a long time. In my humble opinion, there's never been a bigger opportunity to do good than what we're talking about tonight. In terms of helping Somerville residents live a life of dignity in a place that's not crap. And let's get down to it. There's always going to be concerns. That's how you kill projects. You never oppose projects. You just say, I got concerns. And then things get delayed. So I have no problem with taking the time out. I understand that, makes sense, and I do pledge, at least Mike stand on the redevelopment committee to listen to what everybody has to say. But let's unite as a community to do something special. Remember that this is really, what happened after Irma is not, just can't happen again. It just can't. And this stuff about Jack Morris, who cares about Jack Morris? I mean, give me a break. We have an opportunity. The reason why this is an historic opportunity is because it's owned by one entity. I really don't care what that entity is. But because it's one entity, we can, in one stroke, redevelop a major section of this town and help people quick. As if doing one lot at a time that would take for decades. So that's what we're talking about. Do good. So I look forward to working with everybody on an expedited basis to make it.
Thank you. Motion to close public hearing on this ordinance.
Council members Granville Brady, Jane Cavuta, Tom Mitchell, Randy Pitts, Roger Vroom, Fred Weed.
Yes. Motion table.
Second.
Just one comment.
Okay.
I
I wasn't fast enough. No, that's fine. This is important.
This is
important.
My one comment.
No, everyone needs to be heard.
My one comment here is that in lieu of an extremely high density being imposed on all 4 of these zones, 3 of them, I think perhaps we should look at a transfer of development rights system. We looked at this before, never implemented it, but the idea was the owner of property in the flood zone could transfer some of the development rights he currently holds in the flood zone into his property
outside flood zone.
As a member of the redevelopment committee, Tom, bring that to the group. All right, we have a motion and a second. Kevin, roll call.
Council members, Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Cavuto,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell,
Yes.
Randy Pitts,
Yes.
Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed.
This is a motion to table, correct?
Motion to table.
Then yes, to table.
All right. Last one, 2654-21-1101, amending Chapter 102, Land Use and Development, Article 11, Zoning 102, creating R7 Townhouse Apartment Resident District, Block 71, Lots 6 and 15. For the public, R7 is the East Cliff Street project between East Cliff and between Culver and Grove on the south side of East Cliff Street. Motion for a public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Council members, Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Cavuto,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell,
Yes.
Randy Pitts,
Yes.
Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
Public hearing on this R7 zone. If you need comments or questions, please.
This is so fun. East Cliff Street resident, or used to be. First off, I heard, forget Jack Mark. It doesn't matter if it's him or anyone else. He's right now in a lot of people's mouths because these are his properties we're discussing. He's done a lot of building in multiple areas. People are pissed off. I'm gonna say that. I'm trying to be diplomatic, but after what I heard you said, Mr. Brady, you know why East Cliff Street is empty right now? You know why it's an eyesore, or whatever you'd like to call it? It's because we lost our homes. Not just us, and by us, I mean the Brookside residents, other people on East Cliff Street. We sat there that night, God knows doing what. For example, my husband and I were looking at a house. What happened? Whoosh, water. What else besides water? Let's see, gasoline, sewage. They're empty for this reason right now. Yeah, we want to go back. Understand, we don't want East Cliff Street to be empty, but we have to be able to afford it. And I'm not just saying me. I'm saying for other people who want to come into Somerville and make Somerville still. I've heard it so many times from residents, from you guys, that Brookside has a history of being the starting place for many Somervillians. It's a starting place. So you can't say, oh, this is empty, we need to build right away. No. Do you want more starting Somerville people to come in? Do you want more economic growth? Do you want more families coming in that'll help our school system? Do we want more input, more design to the town? Then we have to do this right. We have to think smart. Let it be an eyesore, but let's make sure we do this safely and correctly. Let's have the meetings. Let's bring in the community like we're doing tonight. Let's keep discussing logical ways to make an eyesore a safe place. Or maybe move it up to higher grounds and turn that into parkland. Maybe make a cute little pond, God knows what, but we need to be safe about it. And the fact that you're concerned that a building that is empty needs to be filled right away, great, but you're not understanding. For people who would love to go back to their homes. I talk to these people every day. I talk to other renters in town. A lot of us would love to go back, but most cannot afford it anymore. We can't. We didn't want to leave that night. You think I want to be living with my parents? God bless them for taking in me, a toddler, and their annoying son-in-law. But if I had it my way, I'd be standing here tonight and I'd go back to East Cliff Street. I'd go back. I'd be able to sleep in my bed. Hell, I'd be able to sit outside and have a cigarette and let my dog take a crap if I could. It would be fantastic, but we need to be safe about that. If you want that eyesore gone, be safe about it, be smart, do not rush it. And make it affordable. And I know it's not an easy process. We can spit this word out all night, all day, tomorrow, next month, in years. But we need to consider what builds growth besides money. It's people coming in with new ideas. It's people who have been here with ideas. We can't chase them out. And if we rush and we hit the same mistakes, you're chasing them out. You're going to have people who are like, why did we come to this town? Why are we here? You know what? I'm going to pack my family up. I'm going to go look at Bridgewater. Or Warren, for example, by where my mother lives, Warren has a wonderful housing idea. It's called the Woods at Warren. And you know what's wonderful about it? It's a mixed community. And by mixed community, for people who are recovering from anything, whether it's substance abuse, domestic abuse, They're living with people with disability who couldn't think they could live on their own. They're living with other people who are low-income housing. It's a beautiful concept that is bringing more to the town of Warren, that is making it more attractive, that is bringing more businesses. For example, the Salted Lime, he owns a restaurant in Warren. The roots, you know how booming that is because there's other people coming in. That's what we need to bring back to Somerville. And rushing things will push it away. And it will keep pushing away, and we keep hitting these situations. So if you want to fill East Cliff Street back up, or take it away from being an eyesore, we need to be smart, and we need affordable housing, because immigrants founded our country. Immigrants are founding towns, small businesses. Where did they come from? Immigrant families who worked hard. Half these people here probably have family roots. Most of your families, what? Own small businesses, worked hard. But you know they struggled financially and everything. But what opportunities gave them to be a part of this town? Safety and affordability, just like every other town out there. I don't give a damn how long it takes, but we need to consider this, and we need to consider it fast before we consider rushing into construction. That is the biggest thing. If you want Somerville to stay Somerville, think about the people. I don't think you guys are the villains. I get there's a lot going on, but you need to understand. Here you are telling someone who lives in East Cliff Street, let's build it up. You could build it up tomorrow. I could move back in. I could go through the same crap again. That's not going to make me want to stay in Somerville. That's going to make me take my daughter and move her to, let's see, we're looking at houses in Martinsville right now. That makes me want to go to Martinsville. That makes me want to look even out by Flemington. Because here I'm hearing is this. I want to come back to Somerville. I know so many people want to come back to Somerville, but we need to be safe, and it needs to be affordable for those who cannot financially do it, or those who have a dream to own a house. I can think how many neighbors were looking at properties before this flooding, and now that's gone. So please, do not rush it. Be smart, but think of affordability to bring more into Somerville. And this is the last you're going to hear from me tonight, for now.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Really quick.
Name and address.
My name is Chris Cutler, 64.
You open, you can close. Thank you.
It's just a question. I have no idea whether we have a lot or a little affordable housing in this town. I think we have more than average, but I don't know. Have we quantified that? Because the Mount Laurel things, their town's more relevant.
Several years ago, maybe more than several years ago, we commissioned a consultant to come in and look at existing conditions. The planning board was concerned about where we stand in terms of the market. Where does our existing housing stock, both in terms of owner occupied and in terms of rental, fall? And that's 7, 8 years ago now?
Yeah, it's the master plan, the housing element master plan, yes.
It's essentially determined that 40% plus of our market rate housing met the requirements of affordable housing. What it didn't do, it didn't put deed restrictions. It floats with the market rate.
And unfortunately, so with the status now of the affordable housing in New Jersey, it's now, coal has been eliminated, and it's now in the hands of the courts. So it's almost a town by town, situation where there's a mandate to fulfill. The data we've provided so far has not forced us to have a definite structured mandate, because with affordable housing, those are deed restricted units. Once they go into the inventory, that property is sold by an owner to another owner. Those units must remain affordable. We do not have that restriction yet. The affordability we're referring to in these ordinances, it's in there just to give it a name. It's gone under different names like workforce housing or market rate, housing. And I maintain that we have a wide range of rent from maybe $1,200 a month up to $5,000 a month if you're so inclined to have a mortgage. But it's been our opinion, as well as the planning boards, that we have affordable, we have a range of affordability, and it's really a market condition-driven system.
Well, thank you. In the spirit of doing things right the first time, it may make sense to address that now. That some ratio should be affordable housing to according to whatever amount we're all.
That would take a council action to actually establish an affordable housing plan. Now, that way you're waiting about 10 to 12 months to get that through the system because of the math that goes with it. You don't pull numbers out of the air. You've got to go to the courts. You've got to do a lot of stuff.
It's not so much to define it exactly, but to be able to show a judge in the future that we thought about this and we did prepare.
No, if we ever get challenged, we've got to do that anyway.
Yeah.
And we have the numbers. We've got the numbers of market rate housing right now. So we know where we sit with all this stuff. But when we typically talk about affordable housing, we're talking a managed program.
I think 10 to 12 months is fine. There is no hurry. We don't need to make a big mistake. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. Rich, you want to go? Yes.
Oh, my God.
You need comments only. Mr. O'Neill, introduce yourself, please.
Rich O'Neill, 124 West Fifth Street, in Somerville, of course. I've been residing in Brookside for a couple of years, just for the record. My biggest fear tonight is that this whole thing is going to get stalled, as Dr. Brady said. And my fear is that if it gets stalled, the owner of the property is going to repair what's there and reoccupy what's there. And when I first started apartments, it was actually a Hurricane Dory in 1971. But down there in the mud many times since then, I see the devastation. Thankfully, we didn't have the loss of life, but that's going to happen. If people get back in there, the timing is going to not work out properly, and somebody's getting back. It darn near happened this last time. A couple of firemen got stuck on the fire. You know, it's not just the residents who has to come in and out. That situation has to be resolved. You know, like the road guy said, you come to the road tickets. You guys got to work in the road. You got to do something. Doing nothing is going to make that place get reoccupied, and then you can all attend the funeral, because it will happen. Because we're just a cut sheet right now. We've been lucky over these years. That luck is going to run out. Don't let this thing linger, because something's going to happen. Thank you.
So noted. Thank you. Okay. Okay.
Oh,
Frank Mackley, the 129 Barton Street in Somerville. I've listened to everybody and I can really sympathize with what everyone is saying. But there's a lot of people that had their houses flooded that normally would never happen. And I would wonder if we might even consider in the East Cliff Street area if we could, you know, maybe green acres and convert that wall to parklands. Because there's a lot of houses that flooded that never flooded. Culver Street and, you know, William Street to the bottom, the water backs up. And it would give us more of a floodplain for the water to perk down. All I wanted to suggest. It's something that hasn't been suggested, but maybe we should just forego this. It's a golden opportunity. I think the man would do it right. But there's so much naysaying that I'm not sure. Thank you.
Artie Dare, 81 Center Street. I kind of predate most of you guys. One of the things that I was glad to hear was that COA has been disbanded because COA was basically incompetent. When I sat up there, COA came to Somerville and said, you have a deficit of 4,400 affordable housing units in town. We said, where are we going to put it? So we're over 100 square miles. What they did was took Hillsborough, Bridgewater, Branchford, who all had 08876 zip code, and lumped it into this 2.36 square miles and put it all on us. I was in Frank Walsall's office a couple of years ago, and he had on his board 2,200. I said, what is that? He said, that is the number of apartments either approved under construction or in the planning cycle. I know for a fact that a couple of years ago, Cliff Street was being considered being torn down and high-rise luxury apartments put there. When Mayor Brain looked at it and said, this does not go before the planning board, it goes before the board of adjustment, it was pulled back. And I've talked with each and every one of you over the years, Mike Kerwin, Bernie, you, Dennis, Grant, and one of the things that you all said, what attracted you to Somerville was its diversity. If we build, and I hope we does build something nice, but will it be affordable for the people who are already there? Somerville is in a transition. A friend of mine told me that my house, or my neighborhood, which I call the Soma District, south of Maine, is the most desirable properties in town. Properties on Third Street are now over $400,000. I have a feeling that when the people over in the townhouses come out and look down Wood Street and see Kitty's Laundromat and Rocky's Bodega, well, somebody's going to say, hey, let's redevelop this. And you and I have talked about moving that line, that zoning line, behind the property. I want it to be done. I want it to be done safely, I want it to be done correctly, but I want it to be done affordably.
All right, can I have a motion to close public hearing on this final ordinance? So moved. Second?
Council members: Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Cabuda,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell,
Yes.
Randy Pitts,
Yes.
Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes. I will entertain a motion. Motion to table. Second. Roll call.
I would just like to make one comment. We've heard the term affordable housing, we've heard a whole bunch of terms tonight, but all I'll say is just because the market says it's affordable, doesn't mean it's actually affordable for working people and working families. Thank you.
Sure. Not to refute the councilman, but to support it, the term affordable housing is somewhat misleading because it's affordable to whom? For example, you may have someone in Salem County who can live very comfortably on a $600 a month apartment. Unfortunately, in Somerville, New Jersey, that affordable housing unit is probably going to be about $1,100 or $1,200. Okay, it's not the $2,200, but it's still pretty high. Mayor Sullivan mentioned to me that if two teachers lived in Somerville or wanted to move to Somerville and they made $40,000 each a year, an aggregate of $80,000, they would be eligible for affordable housing because our threshold is very high. So I just wanted to clarify for the council and for the public, we are not talking about low-income housing. We are talking about workforce housing. The use of the term affordable housing brings the wrath of God down upon us because someone's going to say, I want a 4-bedroom apartment and pay $600 a month. It ain't going to happen, and I'll tell you why. It's simply a matter of economics. If I'm going to build something, it's got to cost me money. If I decide to build an apartment complex, I'm going to put the same basic quality material into the whole thing. I'm not going to say, well, you guys get, number 2 plywood, and you guys get number 8 plywood, whatever, because I'm not a builder, you understand? But the whole point is, I'm not going to skimp. I may give you slightly better countertops, but you're still going to get the same stoves and refrigerators. I happen to be an owner of a rental property.
Oh, a landlord.
Yeah. And I'm renting it out now. My son's with us. As a result, we had to look at what the market value of that was. And quite honestly, I'm taking a hit because one of his friends is staying there. He pays me rent, but when I look at the cost of taxes, when I look at the cost of condo fees, or whatever we want to call it, homeowner association, when I look at the cost of maintenance, and when I look at the return on my investment, should I take out a bank loan for this, even with the interest rates being low, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you right now, there is not affordable housing, and it's not coming to Somerville by any developer we want to talk to. If someone comes in and says, I can put up $400 or $500, $600 a month apartments and not require a huge density because I'm gonna have to make up for that difference. That's the economy, and I know how, you folks are very concerned about the human aspect of it. But I have to say, unfortunately, this country is based upon a capitalist concept. People invest in areas where they can get a return on their investment. And if we don't make it available for people, they won't invest here. And if we want to have open spaces, wonderful. But remember one thing, we're all going to be paying for it. That's all I have to say.
But the term affordable housing is that ordinance.
Affordable housing is not $600. No one can get that.
Don't preach.
You haven't rented in decades.
All right, we have a motion, second.
We have a
Roll
second.
call.
Council members Granville Brady, Jane Cavuta,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell, Randy Pitts, Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes, the table.
I want to thank the public for their patience. I want to thank the council for your patience. I hope I handled it the right way. We could always look back and say, we should have just lumped it all together, but it's a big step for the town, and by pausing, I just want to be sure we don't lose the momentum and the interest that I sense from both sides of the table. I'll take a 2-minute recess if people care to leave. I appreciate that. If you'd like to stay for the business part of the meeting, you're welcome to stay.
I think you're here for the long haul. I think we need to have a conversation.
Nice charisma. Hey, my face should be in like he had me go for writing.
I joined I would ask you.
Listen, I wanted to make some.
Still streaming. Folks, we're still streaming. We're still streaming, not reading, streaming. You can have a conversation, you have to take it outside. Thank you. Julian, you're getting used to the microphone, so we're still live.
No, I got what I needed. We're good.
Oh, yeah, no, that's.
Everybody's private conversation.
All right, we are now at the regular open public meeting portion of our meeting. Motion to open to the public.
Second.
Council members Granville Brady, Jane Cavuta, Tom Mitchell, Randy Pitts, Roger Vroom, Fred Weed.
We are in the regular open meeting. Please address your comments to myself.
I don't even know why I was here. I wasn't here for the rest of the stuff. I had questions about the table.
Name and address, please.
My name is Larry Cleveland, 1134 Grand Avenue. And the ordinance for introduction, that was tabled.
Yes, there's two of them, basically, they're very similar. Repealing ordinance 2303 and 2304 from, I think, 2009. In full, it says repealing ordinance in full, regulating political contributions to local political candidates, office holders, and local campaign committees from business entities and professional entities. That's one, and then the other one is repealing in full, which regulates political contributions to local political candidates and office holders from developers entering into agreements for redevelopment projects. I had an opportunity to look at the 2303 and 2304. Where are these two coming from? Why are we, maybe I don't understand what these are repealing, but it seems to me that 2304 and 2303 were suppressing the ability for an old term, pay to play. So if this is repealing that, isn't that a step backwards away from what you could use the old-fashioned term, good government? So I'm just wondering, where did this idea come from? I know we're tabling it, but it's important to me to understand, where did this come from?
Why? Right, why are we doing it?
Yes, oh yes, exactly.
And the short answer is that there's a state law on this subject. Our ordinance is different than the state law. So basically, I think the idea was just to harmonize our structure with that of the state law.
So the state law said it's okay?
No, I think it was different dollar figures, right?
Yeah, the state law has if you make reportable contributions on a non-competitive contract, so there's no bid, there's no nothing. If you make reportable contributions above, in an election cycle on a contract that's lower than, that's greater than 17,500, that's the state regulation. Municipality had one that they put in place, I was here maybe 10 years ago, that listed $5,000. So that's the difference.
So would it be better in discussing the ordinance if we talked about it like it was going to coincide with the state? Because this sounds extremely scary. I mean, on the first blush, without understanding what it's talking about, it speaks to me like...
Well, you don't need an ordinance once you get rid of it, because you would have, I should say once you get rid of it. If it's removed, it would just follow the state, kind of like the state noise ordinance. But I mean, I guess we could certainly put something on the books that says it's in concert with the state regulation.
And he's also talking about just describing it to the public, because on the surface, it looks like we're trying to get away with something.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. To me, it seems like, is there I appreciate the help. Was there some sort of problem, or is there some sort of push that, I give more money, and that's what this is about, or is it just to line up with the state?
In my experience, the only issue I know that's involved in the ordinance is the requirement for the borough to audit it. And what happens is we then have to audit all the contracts over $5,000. It's pretty cumbersome. And most vendors in the state of New Jersey follow the 17.5. They don't even realize that there's a such thing as a 5,000. I would say back in the day, there were probably 30 to 50 municipalities that just created their own because they wanted, let's just say, more strict.
Right, and that's what we were doing.
Yeah, that's what we did at the time. That's what the governing body chose to do at the time.
Has it been working?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, it does require, if there's a challenge that's made, it will require me to go to ELAC, which is the finance, the campaign finance, and review all the governing body's information. Generally, I don't know where I generally don't know where the elected officials raise their money from, right? So what happens is I don't look to see who gives them money and things like that. But if there's a challenge made, I will. They will have to sign, the vendors have to sign an affidavit saying they didn't violate it, right? So that's all I'm worried about. So they can't get a contract from the borough until they sign that affidavit saying, you know, they didn't provide an amount above the a reportable amount. No, they can't. In plain numbers, a vendor can't give more, I believe, than $299 in a non-competitive contract to any member that existed on the council the year before, that's running for office, or a county election committee, if I recall that correctly. But there's a form every year that we give for all our vendors that they have to fill out, and then we struggle to get that form back, and to get it back in the record. But that's pretty much the way it works.
All right,
to my knowledge, has never been a challenge.
We know the only, I can understand that, and it sounds like it might be working, that's why. We don't need to change.
I would say it's
Change
work.
seems to be, it's just alarming, the change, I know it's more work for you, and I certainly would wanna streamline those kind of issues, especially if it's not necessary, but it just, these two, they scream like, yeah, it's okay to write check. That's what it says, that's how it says to me. It may not be true, but that's what it
I think
says.
it's also for the smaller
And
vendors.
just so you know, it's
burden
a
to them.
non-competitive contract, so it's not, it's not a competitive quote. Once you have a competitive quote, that ordinance, including all the ordinances, go out the door, right? So it's only in a non-competitive environment. So if the borough was, right now, the borough can provide a contract for up to $6,000 because they have a QPA, and so that does allow us to do $6,000 in a non-competitive environment. That doesn't happen often, but it could legally. So really what this does is kind of, it just makes the record keeping and as well as everything else more normal. I mean, we do provide that ordinance to, a lot of vendors that don't understand the ordinance either, because it's not consistent with the state's numbers.
I would say that maybe renaming this might be a better way to go, just, and when we introduce it, I'll follow and see what's going on. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Gina Stratton, 16 Grand Avenue. In the interest of transparency, could you explain why that was tabled so quickly? Like, you put that motion, the ordinance out, and then the first thing, when it came up for a vote, it was motion to table. So why did we put that in place, and why did we take it off so quickly?
Well, in my particular case, I had talked with the council president today about it, why it appeared in the first place. In lieu of the fact that we were gonna have a protracted meeting, I thought tonight, it just didn't make sense to waste time with that one. There's plenty of time to do it, so we could all understand what it was. The way Kevin just explained that to me was some novel information for me too. When I first read it, I agreed with what Mr. Cleveland said, like, wow, this is allowing pay to play, which is coming to Somerville. We all have to submit event forms when we're a candidate, and that goes to the commission, and that's all public record. I was not misinformed, but I was confused as to what it meant as well. And if I was, I'm sure the rest of the council was too. So we still have 2 meetings to clarify it. We can reintroduce it and vote on it before the end of the year.
Just from an outside public perspective, to share that maybe what some people thought, is that it went in hand with the other 4 ordinances. So, again, transparency, proper language, clarification when we speak, I think that goes a long way for public trust. Thank you.
Hey, Order here, 81 Center Street. Just a couple of things. Are there any plans to do anything about the Davenport dip over by Starbucks? I've seen cars bottom out. It's not pleasant riding with that.
Right now, that's still a public road, correct?
But South Davenport's private and Main Street's a state road.
The owner, which no one wants to mention their name, it's like Darth Vader, has approached the DOT, who did the repaving and created the ditch, over the last 5 or 6 years to get them to repair it. And because it involves the elevation of one manhole, they refuse to do it. So it's not our issue, right, because Main Street is a state highway. The road that ties into it is a private road, South Davenport Street. The owner's prepared to do the work as long as the DOT does their part. The DOT says, no. That is a very technical answer there.
I understood it.
Good.
Kevin, we just had DOT here a month ago on something else. Let's reach out to them again, and hopefully the focus in Trenton now is on doing their jobs, not on the election. So let's see if we can, get them to agree. It shouldn't be a big deal. One man.
The least we should be able to do is put a sign that says dip.
Doesn't solve the problem.
Make people slow down and go down the hill, so, right? Ain't that wrong?
That's traffic calms.
Okay, 106 Veterans Memorial Drive. The house has been abandoned for at least a dozen years, and it's overgrown. It's just, are there any plans to demolish that house?
It's right on the corner of Hamilton.
No, it's
That's
an
on me,
international
Mayor. We're doing,
I-
I'm thinking, sorry to interrupt you, Art, I'll just say that's on me. We're doing what we call an in-rem foreclosure. It's a protracted process that we get, it's not supposed to be a protracted process, to essentially get ownership of the property because the taxes haven't been paid for some time. The courts, between the pandemic and a lot of other issues, the courts haven't been moving with any speed. So the short answer to your question is I'm working on it, but it'll be at least a few more months before that's taken care of. It is possible for the construction department to issue an order to tear down the building itself because it's a health and safety hazard. And I think my last conversation with Kevin was that they were in the works to do that. I don't have a schedule.
I know, it's
Chairman,
expensive.
who pays for that, work?
Ordinarily, it's a lien on the premises, but
Who pays for the work?
he's in it's the taxpayer.
Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Oh, yeah, I
because
know.
It's one of those things that have that
You
happen.
already
in
knew
the
the
past.
answer to that question.
And if there's asbestos or whatever, it could be costly.
Yeah, but it is, as you say, it's an eyesore and ultimately a health hazard.
You did one over on Fairview Avenue several years ago. I think the cost of removal was $50,000.
We did one on South Caston too.
South Caston also.
Yeah.
I just have a question, Art. What's the location of that house you're talking about?
106 Veterans.
One Veterans next to the Santander Bank?
No, over by
all the way down.
The metal place.
Oh, by the metal, okay.
By the metal place.
Thank you.
Okay, we're having a problem. The last meeting that we had, that was open to the public in 2020, my daughter talked about the parking problems in our neighborhood. A lot of it being exacerbated by Soma, and the Lauren Gardens and South Bridge Gardens. It's pushing people onto 3rd Street, South Side Avenue, and South Bridge Street. One of the major problems is people are parking right to the corner, blocking out access on curb cuts, and it's really bad. We did some striping over on South Bridge, on the corner of South Bridge and 3rd Street, was a fire hydrant. Could we take a look at some additional striping? When we come down Green Hill Avenue, I see all the corners are striped, the parking is good. We're not seeing that. It's very, very tight. And
So 2nd and Bridge, 3rd and Bridge, and South Side and Bridge?
Center and 3rd, Center and 2nd, Hamilton and 2nd, South Bridge and 3rd. Very bad. So if we could do some more striping, take a look at that. Tom, I promised that I would get you a list of lighting on Center Street, which poles need to be more illuminated. I'll get that to you before the end of the month, because it's really dark. I approached Mayor Gallagher way back when we were doing work on the townhouses, which are now townhouses. They were gonna be whatever they were gonna be, about naming the street after Paul Robeson. And my wife and I were looking at the townhouse a couple months ago, and she said, look at the address, 12 Robeson Street. Robeson Street, that's the best we could do? Paul Robeson was an iconic figure later on after he had died, but Paul Robeson Way, Paul Robeson Boulevard, or something, just Robeson Street, might as well be named after Robeson County, North Carolina. But we got it, and I appreciate it. Okay, let's see, okay, had a conversation, we were all at the park for the planting of the tree for Maggie Love class. Unfortunately, the tree didn't last long. Had a conversation with Mike Kerwin at the time. That was pretty good. And we suggested that, we suggested up here, we plant a tree for all of the mayors. It would be a nice grove over here. I had asked 2 years ago to rename that park after Paul Robeson or Lee Van Cleef. I would suggest that we name it after the Mayor's Park, and a nice grove of trees for each mayor that we have. Nobody appreciates what you guys do and what you go through, unless you've been there. And I just want to thank every one of you for putting yourselves out there for all these years that I've known you. Thank you.
Mayor Gallagher, how about a couple of prickly pear trees?
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have to pick a tree.
That would be a public meeting to attend. Line us all
There'll be a lot of creative efforts
Pick a
there.
tree to describe this person.
Brian Gallagher, 7 Fairmont Avenue. Just doubling back to the two pay-to-play ordinances. I believe actually that was one of Kevin's first jobs as a new administrator, was crafting those ordinances for the council. And they were done very extensively. So I believe, if I recall correctly, it was $299 for developers, for professionals, for existing council donations, for political campaigns for council candidates, and for county committees as well, county political parties. It's pretty broad. So my question, and I don't know the state statute, is the state statute as significant? Does it have the same parameters that the borough ordinance has? And I don't know the answer to that.
My guess, and I'm guessing, is I would doubt it includes county political parties.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
I would doubt it. That was something that was unique, I think, to Somerville.
Well, and I think we're all familiar with wheeling. I mean, let's, and I think before these are taken off of the rolls, the borough's rolls, I think you need to take a look at that. They were put in place for a very specific reason. At that time, pay-to-play was becoming a very significant issue. A lot of elected officials going to jail. So we looked at it and we said, this is going to protect electeds, it's going to protect professionals. And the reality is, and you can ask some of these very professionals here, my tone to them was always, I don't want your money, I don't want your donations, I want your professional expertise for the borough of Somerville. That's it, I don't want your money. And I think by eliminating this, if the state statute doesn't have the same parameters, you're diminishing it. And you're creating an opportunity that right now does not exist. And I think it's held everybody in good stead. And quite honestly, I think it gives the taxpayer a little bit of confidence in elected officials. My next question is, how did this get on the agenda? Who brought this up?
I'll just say it as council president, obviously, when I reviewed the agenda, I had spoken with Kevin about, he was talking, sort of the bureaucracy you have to deal with and all the paperwork that you have to deal with and the amount of, all the amount of work, so that was put on, but, at the end of the day, it was tabled because it's not really written.
So you had it placed on the agenda?
Yeah, then after council.
It was your concept?
After speaking with Kevin, then we all discussed it and said, no, this is,
No, but the concept of bringing it forward to trying to eliminate it out of the borough statute.
I guess you can say that.
Well, no, it's a simple yes or no question.
You could say that.
It's not me saying it, I'm asking.
I answered the question.
We have spoken about this previously because of
No,
okay, the answer to your question is, this has been discussed prior to this meeting, prior to this debate. And the idea was that it is
Where?
between Fred and myself, okay, because Fred is a member of a political party and a chair in a political party. And the issue is, the concern is that people are not jumping in to become elected officials anymore. And a concern that we have is that it may be that people don't want to self-fund their own campaign because, quite honestly, it could be expensive. Now, an example is we have a gentleman who used to live in Massachusetts, who now lives in Middletown, he lives in Berlin, he lives in Italy, who decided he wanted to be a governor. I can't afford to campaign against that person. So there's a consideration at the local level upon people in at least one of the parties that there isn't a lot of people coming forth to campaign and to run for these positions. Does that make some sense?
It does, but it doesn't make good sense.
Well, it may not make good sense.
I look at that and what I hear is we need to allow our professionals to donate more to our campaign. That's what I
We
hear.
need to allow
And
people to donate.
let me go back to the original question. So who said, let's put this on the agenda and take this off of the borough roll?
As council president, I approve the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's still a round the corner answer. So the answer is yes, you did.
Sure, yes, fine,
Okay.
that's what you
All
want
right,
to do.
that's all I want. I need to know. And just the other question is, was this discussed in executive?
No.
Okay. All right, good, I'm glad to hear it.
No, it's not germane to the, the parameters of the executive.
They're not contractual.
Yeah.
Good, and I'm happy to hear that. And then Kevin's been keeping me informed, just changing gears a little bit, Kevin's been keeping me informed of my OPA request regarding the losses down at DPW. Do we have a full accounting yet?
Kevin, I'll defer to Kevin,
not
because you just met
complete.
with FEMA.
Yeah, we don't have a complete, I mean, what I gave you was, I believe, the vehicles, and they're going through each of the, unfortunately, insurance just takes forever, but they go through each of the items. We do know all the items to our extent that we actually have an inventory that we have down there ahead of time.
So you do have an inventory now?
Well, we have everything, an inventory prior to the flood that was insured.
Right.
So we don't have counts on tails of certain things like nails or things like that. Anything that has, is on an inventory list.
De minimis value?
Yeah.
No, and I'm not interested in the de minimis value, I'm interested in the larger value items. So can that be shared at this point? Is that something that can be shared now? The full list of, I'll call it the non-de minimis items that were down there? Well, regardless of whether they have been filed, because I'm sure that you're trying to repair some. That's going to take months and months. So my interest is what was down there that is of a non-de minimis value. And if I'm hearing correctly, the council has that.
We have probably the best list that's going to become available.
All right. Can that be shared?
Yeah, I mean,
It's fine, yeah. Okay. All right.
I don't see any reason to do this. I think it is subject to override.
Okay. And I do appreciate you taking a step back on the other ordinances tonight. I agree with a lot of what Dr. Brady said, much to your surprise.
It's on tape. No.
But it's, and we have a history of doing things in a very procedural manner, and I don't know that it was done there. And I think taking a step back, it was done according to the law, but it wasn't done, I think there's a better way it could have been done. So I think taking a step back and having the ability to take a fresh look at it, and balancing that density with affordable, with the realities of a private property owner who wants to reinvest in his or her property. And regardless of whether that's an individual property owner or a property owner that has multiple dwellings, they should be afforded that same courtesy that, they're looking to reinvest in their community. So with that, thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Start looking through your Audubon
Yeah.
trees. Or the Audubon was birds, I'm sorry. I guess once we have the trees, we'll have the birds.
Yeah.
Dennis, can I get hemlock?
You're not a mayor, you're not a mayor.
No, he wants trees for everybody.
Okay. Motion to close the public
So
session.
moved.
Second.
Councilmember Granville Brady,
Yes.
Jane Cavuta,
Yes.
Tom Mitchell,
Yes.
Randy Pitts,
Yes.
Roger Vroom,
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
We are finally at our consent resolution part of the meeting. Are there any council wishes to discuss code 5? All right,
Which one's that?
17 and 18. All right, I'll summarize the others. 315 is a refund of a temporary food permit. 316 is approval of the zoning permit application. 319, award of a non-fair and open contract for final design for safe routes to school. 320, approving installation of the sidewalk. as defined in the planning board resolution, and I don't have the location of that sidewalk. Kevin, do you have it?
That's the sidewalk that was defined by the planning board. They're building a house on Steer Street, and they had to get approval.
The subdivision
Yeah,
for a
Davenport and
new
Steer.
home where a vacant lot exists right now. Okay. 321, interlocal agreement for sanitary sewer services with the Borough of Manville for a 3-year contract. 322, amending a resolution that rejected all bids for snow plowing services. 323 is awarding a 2-year contract to Rogers Paving Contracting Inc. for snow plowing services. 324, memorializing the approval of the fire department lights parade on December 4th at 6 p.m. till 11. 325, confirming and approving the name of the new civic space in the Somerset Station project to be known as Somerville Civic Center. 326 is approving and authorizing commencement of redesign work by changes to the borough civic space by the redeveloper. Motion on those.
So moved. Second.
Council members Granville Brady.
Yes.
Jane Cavuta.
Yes.
Tom Mitchell.
Yes.
Randy Pitts.
Yes.
Roger Broom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
317 rescinds the resolution which approved the final application payment for Dell Tech for Somerville Borough Hall for the cornice restoration, closing out the project in the amount of $44,514.30.
So moved.
Second.
Tom, you had a question?
Yeah, my question, it seemed to me that we were rescinding the resolution and then 318 brings it back again in the exact same amount. I don't know why.
317, there was an error in 317 in the calculation. You approved it last meeting.
Yeah.
It brought the contract up to $232,000 because 44,000 was added into the main number, final number of 280. That's incorrect. So the calculation was wrong. So we're rescinding that one and we're correcting the math in the other one.
Okay.
So 317 will strike the incorrect amount.
Yep.
Okay. Roll call.
Council members Granville Brady.
Yes.
Jane Cavuta.
Yes.
Tom Mitchell.
Yes.
Randy Pitts.
Yes.
Roger Broom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
318 is approving final application payment number 3 for Dell Tech for the
So
cornice
moved.
restoration and closeout of the project.
So moved.
Second.
I believe your question was answered.
Count.
All right, roll call.
Council members Granville Brady.
Yes.
Jane Cavuta.
Yes.
Tom Mitchell.
Yes.
Randy Pitts.
Yes.
Roger Broom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
Bills and vouchers.
When's dinner?
Tomorrow night at 5.
Thank you
At
very
my
much.
house.
I would like to move the payment of bills and vouchers in the amount of $9,082,063.28, and that's my motion.
Oh, I still do that.
Council members Granville Brady.
Yes.
Jane Cavuta. Tom Mitchell.
Yes.
Randy Pitts.
Yes.
Roger Broom.
Yes.
Fred Weed.
Yes.
Before I call for an adjournment, just a quick, brief comment. You got to see democracy, I hope, in action tonight. We're tasked with making serious decisions based on the information we have on hand at any given time. This job doesn't come with a crystal ball, doesn't come with a Ouija board. It comes with being a good listener and using our judgment and experience. And I hope that in the spirit of what we heard tonight and the actions we took tonight, we keep the momentum going. I do not want to see these ordinances wither and die on the vine, but I think we can craft something that meets the economic and human needs of this borough going forward. With that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll see you in 3 weeks. We have a calendar change in December. We'll be back after Thanksgiving. I wish the public and members at the table a happy, healthy, fattening holiday. And we'll be back for the final month of our business year